For thriving, you have to have a vision. But most people, I think 95% of the population is driven by fear or survival, and only 5% are forward-looking and vision-driven. When we chase something beautiful and glorious, we get inspired, and that inspiration frees energy, and that energy is what gets it done.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou, and boy, do we have an exciting guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is a true thought leader. He is a best-selling author, and he is someone who really understands health and well-being. I am speaking, of course, of none other than the one, the only, the legendary Udo Erasmus. Welcome to the show, Udo.
Hi, glad to be on. Yeah!
Good to have you here, my man. So, Udo, the folks that come and listen to this show tend to be seekers. They tend to be, many of them are entrepreneurs. They're the ones who are out there to make the world a better place with what they do. And they come and listen to this show because they want to learn, not so much from me because I'm here every week, but they want to learn from you. But before they can open themselves up to you, they got to get to know you. So tell us your backstory. How'd you get to be the great Udo Erasmus?
Oh, boy. I said, if you got 83 years, I'll tell you all of it. But actually, I was born in what was Germany, which is now Poland, during the Second World War. My parents came from Latvia and Estonia. My father had a farm. When Hitler and Stalin made their non-aggression pact, Latvia went to the Soviet Union and part of Poland went to Germany. But there was nobody from Latvia or Poland at the meeting. They just took it.
They took
because
it,
they could. Yeah. My father loved the Russian people because they have a lot of, they're feeling people.
Yep.
They're poetic and they're articulate. And so he loved the Russians, hated communism because the communists took everything away from everybody.
Yep.
So he was given a farm in Poland by Germany because his background was German and Swedish, although he was in Latvia. So he ended up in Poland on a farm, and the farmer who owned the farm became his farmhand. So, okay, you can imagine that was a little intense. And he said, well, look, we're living through crazy times. Let's run the farm the way the farm should best be run. And at the end of it, when all this shit settles down, we'll find out, we'll sort it out. And then they became really good friends. So I was born on this stolen farm. And at the end of the war, we were, first war baby, then refugees. I was 2.5 years old. We were running from the Russians. They were chasing us in tanks and trucks. And the Allies, we like to think of ourselves as the good guys, they were shooting at us from planes. Wow. And it was all mothers and women on horse-drawn hay wagons on dirt roads, no military presence. So they were literally using refugees as target practice.
Jesus.
And we hear that about the other side, but we don't like to admit that we're just as crazy as the other side is. So we made it out. My mother had to leave me behind because she had 6 kids and she couldn't handle more than 2 because she decided to go through the fields, the snow-covered fields. It was winter, because it was safer to do that than to stay on the road. So I got left behind, and eventually her sister found out what happened, and she came and looked for us and found us, and we got reunited with the family. But I remember mostly not feeling safe, being hungry, and not knowing what I could trust, because every day was a different story because it was chaos, right? And I got thinking about, God, there must be a better way than this to live. And I listened to people argue, adults argue about stupid things and get really intense about it. And at one point, when I listened to one of those arguments, they always made me feel really uneasy. This thought came to me, man, there must be a way that human beings can live in harmony. And this little cocky voice from a 6-year-old who doesn't know how complicated everything is said, I'm going to find out how. And that's been my driver all my life. So I'm always trying to look at in whatever talent I have and whatever situations I'm in, how can I bring quality into this situation? How can I bring a little more? I'm not into survival, I'm into thriving. And,
I love that.
And for thriving, you have to have a vision. But most people, I think 95% of the population, according to Tony Robbins at least, is driven by fear or survival. And only 5% are forward-looking and vision-driven. And I would rather be drawn by a vision than be driven by a stick. Drawn by a carrot rather than driven by a stick. Even horses, you hang a carrot in front of the horse, and the horse will chase the carrot and take the load forward. And it's more effective than when you keep whipping it on the butt with the whip, right? So when we chase something beautiful and glorious, we get inspired, and that inspiration frees energy, and that energy is what gets it done. Enthusiasm, inspiration.
I love that. I love that. That's beautiful. Yeah. So Udo, tell me what happened when you got reunited with your family. Where did you end up?
We ended up in Germany, and then my father came. He ended up in Hitler's army. He spoke 5 languages, so he was an interpreter, and he would take messages up the line in the army, and he would notice how people embellished their stories because they wanted to look good to their superiors. So they embellished the stories and lied about what they actually did. Yeah. And then the people who made the decisions had bad information that they were making decisions on. Wow. So we were in Germany, and then he came back from being a prisoner of war in Alabama. Wow. And on the way to that prisoner of war camp, he was taken prisoner in Normandy. He went through Quebec. And Quebec looked a lot like Latvia, aspens and birches and evergreens. And he said, if I survive the war, I'm going to Canada. So he came back in 1946, and then it took us 6 years to get the paperwork done to emigrate to Canada. And we went to British Columbia. I went to school in the Okanagan. We had a sponsor there. And so that's that backstory.
Wow. So 1952, you're a kid, you're in British Columbia. What's that like?
Well, we didn't speak English, and we wore short pants, and people called us Nazis. And at that point, I never knew what a Nazi was because my parents never talked about the war, ever. Yeah, it was a crazy thing. I mean, it was really crazy from top to bottom. Yeah. As crazy as the politics is now, we're heading in that direction now too. And it's because we're not paying attention to what is the treasure on this planet, which is life, not money, life. And so when money is supposed to serve life, and we're pretty much in a place where life is serving money. I like in Canada where I live, right? And we talk about and you live, right? We have what is our measure of success, the economic indicators, right? Well, that's not telling you whether people feel safe or they're happy or they feel, like they're working together or inspired. It just tells you how the bank is doing. So why is that the only measure of quality of life that we have? Because the whole thing is backwards. and I think it's running down. It was already running down in the 60s when I started thinking about things. I said, oh my God, I said, like, everything is getting worse with time. Where's the renewing principle in all this? And what I didn't realize at that time is the renewing principle is actually within every human being. It's a part of human nature that most people don't live in touch with. So we're back to the 5% vision, 95% fear, right?
That's very true. I've heard Tony Robbins say that, and he's talked about that in terms of sales conversations. He said that if you're having a sales conversation, 19 out of 20 people, 95%, need to be told what they're going to miss, right? Yeah, you got to appeal to their fear.
So you have to scare them. You have to scare them into buying.
Yeah, that's how they buy. They don't buy any other way. You tell them about all the good they're going to get. They're going to go, well, this could go wrong. That could go wrong. 1 out of 20, you motivate them by telling them what they're going to get. And you said, I'm one of those 1 out of 20. And it looks like you're one of those 1 out of 20.
I am definitely one of those 20. Yeah.
Yeah. So talk about your experience of being in Canada in the 60s, because there's not a lot of folks who are around and as hale and healthy as you are to talk to us about what that was like.
It was wild. Probably the wildest thing about it was psychedelics. And it's wild about psychedelics because they have a way of breaking through your mindset and showing you possibility. And they're, in that sense, they're part of the 5%. Okay. And so, I was a war baby. I was very shy. I was always like this, just like, got to be safe, duck more than dare. I was definitely not that daring in those days. And I was looking for something in studying biology. I wanted to know what life is, because life is everywhere on this planet. And I thought it was amazing. Now, I always found nature amazing. I wanted to know it better so I could appreciate it more. It was not a job kind of thing for me. I just wanted to know everything about nature. And so I studied biology, which is a study of life, but you don't study life in biology. You study form and function. And so then I went into psychology, study of soul, because I thought there must be something important there. You don't study soul in psychology. You study thoughts, beliefs, and emotions. Then I went into medicine because they call it healthcare, and I wanted to know what health is. Because the idea is if you know what health is and somebody has lost their health, you can point them in the direction of health, give them a push, watch them get better, but you have to know the direction you need to push them in, so you have to know what health is. Well, it turns out we only learned about disease in medicine. And we were told in first-year medicine that a doctor should always sound as though he knows what's going on, even when he doesn't. We call that lying on the farm. And that was the end of my medical career, because I wasn't going to make my living lying to people. And then I got into biochemistry and genetics, because in biological sciences, you learn more about health than you do in medicine, because you're studying normal function of normal creatures in normal situations. And health has something to do with normal. So anyway, the 60s, I left the 60s. I did an LSD journey. And in that journey, my big insight was I was always very studious and very serious, and I was good. I got good marks. I'm pretty smart, like all of that. But what I was laughing and crying, rolling on the floor, because it struck me as the funniest thing I had ever come across, that everything that I was so studiously looking for in the world was actually all already inside of me. That was the take home. And it's kind of melted my war baby personality. And I realized, oh my God, I have so many options. I have 1,000 options of how I can live my life. It never occurred to me. I was at that point 22. It had never occurred to me. I was always just like doing it step by step by step by step.
Sure.
And I was used to working, and I liked working. It's not like that. But it was like, oh my God, now I can actually make it any way I want it. With some limitations, because I can't fly because I don't got feathers, right?
Sure,
so,
sure.
But I have a lot of options in how I live my life. And that was a huge door opener for me.
So you can't fly because you don't have feathers, but with the aid of some devices, you actually can fly, right?
Well, yeah. Well, there's that. Well, except I'm not flying, it's flying me.
Sure. But you could be the one controlling the device. So at that level,
yes.
There's a lot you can accomplish, even if you're not necessarily the one doing the thing that causes it to be accomplished. That's the point, right?
Yeah. But,
So you study biochemistry, you learn more about health from biochemistry than you do about medicine, which isn't surprising. To be honest with you, the medical field seems to be the sick care field, not the healthcare field.
Well, that's what it is. And in German, they actually call it sick care.
Really?
They call it Krankheitspflege, which means care for sickness. So that's what they call it. Here, it's called healthcare.
Yeah, it's not healthcare.
But healthcare is a misrepresentation of the service they provide.
It is.
The service they provide has some merit: symptom suppression, crisis intervention, life support systems.
Yes.
And monitoring your journey to the graveyard. So there is a place for all of that, especially the surgery and the crisis intervention and life management, life support systems, but don't lie about what it is.
Yes.
Because but I know why they do it is because if you called it sick care, people would say, yeah, but I want to be healthy. Don't tell me about sick. And so they have to they don't have to, but they've chosen to misrepresent what they do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's hurting a lot of people.
So
because if we knew that was sick care and they wanted health, they would start looking in other places. What else is important to health? And that's basically what I did based on my biology. I'm always looking at nature. Well, how was it in nature before we got civilized? Before we separated ourselves from nature, before we decided we were smarter than nature, because the truth is we're not.
No, we're definitely not.
And health is about living in line with nature and your nature.
So the 60s ends, the 70s starts, the 80s, the 90s.
Yeah.
And you
the second thing I did in the 70s, I was still always trying to find out what is life, who am I, what is purpose, and all of like those usual questions, the seeker's questions.
Yes.
And I stopped doing psychedelics because they can be hard on your body. So I decided wouldn't do them for 2 years. And I then got into, given that I came out of a Christian culture, got into, guess what? The red letter edition of the New Testament.
Oh, wow.
And the idea to me was, okay, well, if I want to model myself after, ain't the prime minister, and it ain't my dad, and it ain't the people I know, who would be a good model? Oh, I think Jesus would be a pretty good model. There's something about...
There's something about that dude.
Yeah, there's something about it, right? And of course, I'm 2,000 years late to the party, right? So how do I... And then the question that I asked myself was, what did he experience that made him live like he did, do what he did, and talk like he did? What did he experience? Nobody said you couldn't do that. What did he experience? Now, how am I going to find out? Well, I'm going to take the red letter edition where everything he said was in red ink and everything else was in black ink in that Bible. And I put things to the test, things he said. And I took risks that if what he said wasn't true, it wouldn't have turned out real good for me.
Yeah.
So I had some magical experiences.
Really?
Yeah. And it was really cool. I mean, it was very magical. And then I got in with a Christian group that treated me super badly because I said to them, it must be possible to see God and live. I just walked into their coffee house. This guy swooped in next to me, didn't introduce myself, looked him in the eye, said, it must be possible to see God and live, because there's stories in the Bible about people who saw God and lived.
Yeah,
well,
there are.
Were told if you see, and we were told if you see God, he kills you. And I was going, wait, he loves me unconditionally, but if I look at him, he kills me? What kind of a God is that, right? And so I didn't believe that. So he got madder than hell. He jumped out of his chair and he was jumping around the room. He was like a tall guy with his arms flailing over his head, screamed at me, you're from the devil, you're from the Antichrist, get out. And I'm going, wow. I'm on the sidewalk in the dark and I'm saying, geez, I haven't seen God. Maybe I'm not supposed to be asking questions. And so all this insecurity, and then it was like out of desperation, sometimes sincerity happens. That's why the dark nights of the soul are really, really important. That's why heartache is important, right? That's why pain is important, because it's very powerful at making us stop and look and try and figure something out. And so I'm there, so I was saying, maybe I wasn't supposed to do that. Maybe there was something wrong I did. I'm just a kid. What do I know? I was 27 by that time, actually, right? And so then I decided to go into nature to clear my head. That's where I used to go to clear my head when things got too crazy for me.
So did Jesus. So did Jesus.
Yeah, I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay, so anyway, I went out to the west coast of Vancouver Island.
Yep.
West coast.
Beautiful place.
If you stand on tiptoes, you can see Japan. Not really, but and I went to this beach. It's called Long Beach, not the California one. We got one too in BC. And nobody, place deserted, just the logs on the beach and me. And somebody had made a little dwelling out of plastic draped it over the logs, and I said, okay, there's my hotel for the weekend. And I went to sleep, and in the middle of the night, I woke bolt upright from dead asleep, and there was this being made of light. Couldn't tell if it was male or female, couldn't tell if it was old or young. No message, no label, but that being embodied a message. See, I'm trying to figure out what did Jesus feel, you know? So this being embodied a message, and the words that came to me to describe that was, I am come not to judge, but to love. I am come not to judge, but to love. I don't know a more succinct summary of the Christ message or the Master's message. Rumi was in that game too. And Hafez maybe was in there too. And maybe Socrates was in there. And so was Buddha and Krishna and Lao Tzu and all those guys, right? And they all said, what you're looking for is actually inside of you. You have what you're looking for out there. You know, if you think $1 million will make you happy, I can tell you it won't. I had a guy working with him. He said that to me. I said, no, you won't. So what do you mean? He said, I said, well, when you make $1 million, you'll find out that it didn't make you happy. Then you're going to say, I'll be happy when I make $10 million. And he looked at it, thought about it, and I said, yeah, I think you're right. Right? Because happiness is built in. Contentment is built in. Peace is built in. In the core of our being is a peace that cannot be affected by anything. And life is unconditional, empowering love for the body. And life is also the master of the body. And so that one experience literally reset my entire life. And by the way, life is also perfect health, because life never gets sick and never dies. So when you say I'm sick, you're actually misrepresenting it, because you are life. Life never gets sick. So you could say, I never get sick, but my body often does, right? Because the body in the world of change is subject to change.
Yes.
And sickness is just one change. But life, the energy that keeps us alive, is formless and indestructible. Never gets sick, never dies. So something eternal and indestructible is present in this temporary terminal condition called the body. And when you get that straight, what the pieces of that are, then you end up in a pretty good place to be able to do what you need to do to have the longest, best, and most enlightened or most bliss-filled life that is possible for a human being.
That's fantastic. So you had this experience with this being of light.
Yeah. Continue
the story. What happened next? Where did you go from there?
Well, so it completely reset my life. It's like, okay, there was my answer. Then I started thinking about it. So who was that? What was that? And I said, well, let's see. What are the options? Could have been Christ. Could have been soul. Could have been spirit. Could have been life. And when I thought about it, I said, you know what? Those are all the same. Those are all the same. So whatever you call it, doesn't matter what you call it. But there's an essence. And I realized that the life I was looking for in biology, there was my answer to, there's the life. That was the life, right? And what is that life? You think about it, it's solar, and it's a fraction of solar energy filtered through 93 million miles, filtered through Earth's atmosphere, filtered through plants, stored in bonds between atoms to make molecules. You eat the molecules. In your cells, those bonds are broken, the energy is released. Now you call it life. Life is a solar energy fraction. We are all solar energy gadgets. Every plant, pretty much every plant, every animal, every human being, every microbe is run on solar energy. Because solar energy, if you put a sheet of plywood on a green lawn, and you take off the plywood after a week, and all the grass is yellow, because you blocked the sunlight out of it, and there wasn't the energy to run the grass. So it starts to lose everything. If you leave it there for a month or two, all the grass is dead, right? And then you start from seeds again. But so a lot of my understanding came from that experience. It was like absolutely a seminal experience. And then I started thinking about it, and a lot of insight came from it. But then it sort of became like a memory. I was saying, damn it, I don't want this to be a memory. I want to live in that presence. And that question got me to a kid who said to me, the peace that you search for in the world is within you. And I was big on peace because I came out of a war, right? The peace you search for in the world is within you, and I can show you how to connect to it. I can reveal you that peace. And he was 14. By that time, I was 30. I didn't think he could, but I was interested in peace. And so he showed me a method of how to get quiet. Because when you become really quiet inside, you discover your own nature. You discover what you are. And fundamentally, a human being by nature is peace, indestructible, all-encompassing, infinite peace in the core. And then within that container of peace is the flow of unconditional, empowering love called life. And that life, when you're in touch with it, shines into the world as what I call inspired purpose, or positive mind, or vision, or wanting to help. Because when you're in touch with that, you feel so cared for. That's not about you anymore. And then it's like, okay, where can I help with the talents I have and what the situation is? Where can I help? How can I, what needs to be done? And how can I make the biggest splash for good in the time that I have on Earth? And then the door is wide open to a lot of possibilities, right? And then you pick them. Now, I picked health because I got poisoned by pesticides. And so that got me really interested in health. But then I took my biology background and I also did psychology. I ended up with a master's in psychology. I used the background to say, okay, the doctors couldn't help me because they have nothing for pesticide poisoning. So I said, okay, I'm on my own. And so then I figured it out. And I ended up working with oils because that was the most neglected, most poorly addressed, most misrepresented, and most poorly understood area in nutrition. And I was looking at minerals, vitamins, amino acids, fatty acids. And so I got into oils. And then I found out that omega-3s, which are the most sensitive nutrient of all of our nutrients, damaged by light, oxygen, heat, needs the most care of any nutrient, gets the least care, and is too low in 99% of the population. But it's essential, which means you have to have it to live and be healthy. You can't make it in your body from anything else. You have to bring it in from outside. If you don't get enough, your health deteriorates. If you don't get enough long enough, you die. And if you bring it back in adequate quantities before you die, then all the problems come from not getting enough are reversed. Because life knows how to build you a body that works, provided you take responsibility here at your mouth to make sure that optimum amounts of all of the essential building blocks for body construction land in your body so life can use them to make you a body that's healthy.
So you became famous because of the book that you wrote, Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. That book sold a lot of copies. And I want you to
I think it's probably about 300,000.
300,000 copies, right? So that's a lot of copies. So
that's a lot of copies.
How did that book capture the zeitgeist in that fashion to sell that many copies?
Okay. Well, you could say a lot of grunt work, because literally when I gave lectures, but let me go back to 99% of the population doesn't get enough omega-3s. And oils are damaged by industry when they're being made because they're more interested in shelf life than in health. And we put oils in the frying pan and wreck them, damage them, and that increase inflammation. They increase inflammation and they increase risk of cancer. Well, I found out omega-3 is essential. 99% of the population isn't getting enough. They're damaged the way we make them and get them. And it occurred to me, oh my God, if we could make oils with health in mind, and particularly bring back the omega-3s that are the hardest to work with and that are too low in most of the population, oh my God, we could help almost everybody. And there's something, it just fired me up like crazy, because there's something about when you help people, it feels good in the heart. We're wired for that. Just like when you do things that hurt people, it doesn't feel good in the heart. I've done some of that. And then I regret it. That's like repentance, right? Change your mind about whatever the stupid thing you were thinking to make it do the stupid thing that hurt somebody.
Sure.
Right? And so I got so inspired. Oh my God, we could help almost everybody. And so then I ended up writing the book because I basically moved in with my mother when I was 41. Because I said, I want to write this book because what I've learned about fats I didn't learn. I mean, I went to a master's degree in biochemistry and genetics. There's so much we never learned about fats. And so I dug that out of the research journals, out of Medline, the database. And I said, man, there must be other people who can benefit from this. And so then I wrote the book in my mother's place. It took me about almost 6 years to write the first version of Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. And we developed a method for making oils with health in mind, and that requires making a very tight system. So no oxygen, no light, and no excessive temperature get to the oil. So the oil isn't damaged. Because when you damage oils, they damage you. When you fry oils, they fry your health. When you fry foods, they fry your health. The way we use oils is the dumbest thing we've ever invented to do to our food if health is our goal. And so I say to people, get your frying pan, I know you got one, turn it upside down, whack yourself upside the head with it, and then throw that stupid thing out if you want to be healthy. If you want to be sick, by all means, fry everything, right? And then I went on the road. I wrote the book, and then I got into a situation where a business situation, and that business situation blew up, and they basically stole what I had done. So then I rewrote the book and started again, and that's what Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill was. And then I spent 15 years on the road, 6 to 9 months every year, living out of a suitcase, talking to people about oils and health. And I went to 40 countries, about 40 countries, probably 30 some. And it never felt like work, just because the thing behind it was always, oh my God, we can help so many people. You know, I know like 99% of all of my audiences needed to hear it. So I had and it never felt like work, even though like some days I did 4 talks and two media shows. And I've done probably 10,000 presentations, which is like a huge amount.
That's crazy, man.
10,000, that's like 34 years, every day, including Saturday and Sunday. And yeah. I did it in 15 years. So wow. I was just on fire. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe my good fortune of being in a position where I can actually do this, knowing that people are going to benefit from it. And then people say, well, what were your challenges? I don't remember that we had challenges. I mean, the FDA tried to shut us down at one point, you know, because they had a whole different story.
Sure they did. Of course they did.
Yeah.
They're in the pocket. They're in the pocket of industry.
Well, but they also, in some ways, they have to protect the public. So they're limited, and they do that within limits. You know, so they said we wanted to shut you down, but you guys had put a 3-month shelf life on the oil, and the oil was never rancid within the shelf life you put on it. So they said they actually shut down the border. You know, like we were in Canada, and so they shut down the border, and we couldn't take the oil into the U.S. By the way, it's flaxseed oil. That was my first oil. That's the richest source of omega-3, easily available.
Yeah,
and so they shut the borders. So we had to take our production to the U.S., started producing in the U.S., because on the border, they can just shut it down. They don't have to take you to court. They don't have to have a case or anything. That's just, they have that jurisdiction at the border. So when we took it across, we always thought that one of these days they're going to shut us down. So I met one of the FDA guys 10 years later and said, so why did you never shut us down? He said, well, we wanted to, but the oil was never rancid within the shelf life you had put on the bottles, which is a pretty short shelf life. 3 months is pretty short. But we wanted to be sure because we're trying to get people healthy, so you can't fake it. You know? So, and they said within that time it was never rancid, so we couldn't win a court case, so we never started one. I said, oh, okay. So there were challenges, and you know, when they said, oh, flax oil is an unsafe food additive. Additive. Yeah, additive. And we said to them, why is it an unsafe food additive? It's a food. And they said, well, we call it an additive because you add it to food. Well, yeah, but you do that with corn oil and safflower and sunflower oil too. Are they food additives? No, they're foods. Well, then ours is a food too. And they backed off because they couldn't give unequal treatment
Yeah.
to, by their own definitions, right? And and then we created a buzz, and a buzz came from being on fire. When you want to do something, people sometimes say what gets done gets paid for. That's what I learned in one of my courses in business. I didn't have any business background. So he said, whatever gets done gets paid for. Well, actually, when you look at things in the world, most of the things that have benefited people didn't get paid for. Like, who invented glass? Do you know who invented glass?
No.
I don't either. But some guy figured it out, and or how you take what's his name, the guy who did 10,000 light bulbs before he got one that worked.
Edison,
right? So how many was he? Did he get paid for his 9,999 failures? No, he was a guy who was inspired to something, and his view was every failure is one step closer to the one that's going to work. And you probably didn't think it was going to take him 10,000 tries.
No, he didn't. He definitely.
But in the end, so it was his inspiration. Same with Mozart. Mozart music came out of inspiration. It didn't get paid for. In fact, Mozart was buried in a pauper's grave. He died of tuberculosis at age 36 in a pauper's grave. Where they threw all the bodies in a hole in the ground and then covered it over, right? So when you start to think about with the really wonderful things that have happened, and then you could put Jesus back in the mix. He didn't get paid either.
No, he didn't have a marketing plan either.
Yeah, exactly. And not only that, he rode a donkey or he walked, right? So you look at where's the quality of life? Where's it come from? It comes from insight, and that insight comes from inspiration. And that inspiration, if you want a formula for it, requires silence, requires stillness. Because when you become really still inside, everything shows up. God shows up, Christ shows up, Holy Spirit shows up, field shows up, love shows up, peace shows up, inspiration shows up, because that's all built into us. But if you never focus inside, then how are you going to get to know it? It's like when in science, right? What do? We've discovered certain things in science. How do we do it? By observation, but specifically by observation of the thing that we want to get to know.
Yes.
Well, how are you going to get to know yourself as a human being if you never focus on what is a human being? So you got to bring your focus out of your mind and away from the outside world, and you bring it inside into the space your body occupies. And it's pretty quiet there, but there's light there, there's love there, there's sound there, there's peace there. And out of that peace comes the love, and in that peace comes all of the insight, the wisdom, the insight, all the genius stuff, Einstein stuff. Einstein was a mystic. What did he say? He says, 99 times I think and I get nothing. And one time I stop thinking, I swim in silence, and the answer comes to me. That's like my experience. Almost everything that's useful that has ever come out of my mouth came from insights out of stillness. So I'm very big on making stillness practice. And I'd like to do that with 8 billion people on the planet. Stillness practice, because when you are able to bring your focus inside into that stillness, everything becomes possible, and you end up with a quality of life that does not depend on external input. Okay, then it's not about the money anymore. Then it's not about the fame anymore, or the status, or the whatever all of those things are. And then you get more done than you'd ever get done than if you were chasing money or you're chasing other stuff. That's my, the people say if you sit down and you do stillness practice, meditation or self-knowledge or something, they say, oh, you're just wasting time. No. Actually, you become more efficient. You take an hour off because you organize, your day gets organized, your clarity is there, the feeling is better, so you have better conversations. You have more insight, you're more flexible, you're more creative, right? And all of these are the things that make the world work better. And they're all inside of every human being on this planet. And 95% of the population doesn't ever go there. Right?
Sure.
It's like this, like, okay, so my goal these days is I'd like to turn total health into a teachable field based in nature and human nature. And the other one is to turn human nature into a teachable field, because we don't have one. And we have been here for 200,000 years or however long we've been here. And you'd think that those would be the two most important things for a person to know in their life. Human nature, what is this, right? And how is it best used? And how is it most properly enjoyed or most effectively enjoyed, right? That would be one. Because you get the gift, you only get it for a while. Right?
True.
One day your body craps out. So it's a temporary terminal condition. And what do you do with the time that you have? And the meaning of life is in the direct experience of it. Not a head trip. Not a head trip, just you feel it. Oh my God, unbelievable. And that, and then health is based in nature and human nature. So to human nature, you got to then add social, environmental, and big picture. And there are 10 parts to it. Each part has a different nature and a different function, needs a different kind of attention, goes off in a different way in response to a different kind of intervention. And we study mostly, when we talk about health, we're just talking about body, mind, plumbing. We're not going to the life part. We're not going to the awareness part. We're not going to the inspiration part, and we're not going to the big picture part either. And not doing that gives us a life that is always in flux and always changing, and we're never in charge of the changes. And that leads to anxiety and depression and overwhelm and all the stuff that people have when they become victimized by the fact that they haven't been able to do their homework and for some reason have not done the homework.
I'm enjoying the conversation.
Yeah.
I'm enjoying the passion and energy you're bringing to the topic. You brought up the FDA, and I felt that in Canada, United States, and most countries, the regulatory bodies have been compromised somewhat in the last couple of decades. They seem to have been captured by industry. This has been the case, I think, for big food, for big pharma, and others. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on this, the fact that a guy who's been an advocate for the environment and for health for all his career, Bobby Kennedy, now is the head man in charge in the United States of health and human services, and he's making some pretty radical moves. At least maybe you and I don't think so. I mean, personally, I think getting rid of coloring dyes out of food was like a no-brainer myself, but there's a lot of people that thought that was a radical move. What are your thoughts on this guy and some of the steps that he's taking?
Well, I'll tell you, I have something that he needs, and I would actually like to have a conversation with him.
Really?
Yeah, because my field for 83 years, my interest has been health and human nature. They're very related. And here's the thing why I'm saying that. I would say Bobby Kennedy's a warrior. If you're going to look at archetypes, he's a warrior. So he went after dirty water, and he went after dirty pesticides, and he went after dirty mercury, and then he got into vaccines and side effects, and now he's doing ultra-processed foods and all of that. And the thing is, when you're a revolutionary, you got to be very, very careful, because Mao was a revolutionary. And the revolutionaries usually know what they hate, and most of the time they haven't a clue about what they love. So what they do is, so their goal becomes destroy the evil, but at some point you got to figure out what's the good we put in its place.
No.
And the warriors tend not to do that. They could, but they tend not to do it, because you need to balance between your warrior and your wizard, if you want to put it that way. And
Sure.
As a wizard, you need to come up with something that works better than the thing that's not working. So when you beat up all the people with their chemicals and their pesticides, and all of the people who are lying about all that stuff, and all are doing it for money, you can defeat them. But in the end, what do you got? well, you still don't know what you need to do, right? So when you fight what's wrong, that doesn't get you to what's right. And in fact, if you go back to the masters only had one law. Jesus had one law, but they all only had, just the masters had one law. What's the law? Love. Love God, love your neighbors yourself. Love, right? Why is that? Because they knew if you're expressing love, you don't need any other laws, because you're not going to go around beating people up, right? And they also were wise enough to know that if you do not follow the law of love, you will break every other law that anybody makes at your convenience. Mm-hmm. And that's the situation we're in, right? So we need to know what's right, and we need to be really clear about it. And we need to become what's right to replace what's wrong. Now, Mao didn't understand that. Mm-hmm. He won the revolution. He was an awful leader. He was an awful politician. He was a good warrior. He was strategic. He was smart. He got it all organized, killed 70 million people in the process, but he won, right? If winning is all that matters, he's a great guy, right? But then he didn't know how to govern worth beans.
He was horrible.
And he had and he was going after sparrows as one of his things. And he had 100 million people shaking rattles in the fields because the sparrows couldn't land because it frightened them, and they would fly until they dropped dead out of the air. 100 million people were doing that. And then they would pick up the dead sparrows in trucks and cart them off somewhere. But then what he didn't pay attention to is the sparrows were eating the insects. So then the insects ate the grains, and they ended up in a famine that cost another 30 million lives, right? And so it's not enough to know what's wrong. If you know what's wrong, you also need to know what's right. And one of the things that's interesting about it, there's always one right answer. 2 + 2 is 4. Mm. So when you know the right answer, you also know all the wrong answers, because everything that's not 4 is wrong for that question. 2 + 2 is 4, right? Well, most things have one right answer and a whole lot of misses, right? So it's more important to know what's right, rather, than to, say, I see, somebody says to you, well, 2 + 2 is not 5. Okay, well, that doesn't tell me what it is. It's only when I know the right answer that I automatically know all the wrong answers. Well, and the same thing is true for human beings. If you know what a human being is by nature, you can bring that to expression, but that has to be your experience. And for that, you have to do homework, right? And then out of that, we can build anything. We can create anything if we get that one thing solid, right? And then money becomes a means of exchange rather than a god. Because for many people, money has become the substitute for their discontent. And the discontent, the right answer is content or peace, personal inner peace, right? Yeah. And the money will not get you that peace no matter how much money you make, right? And if you are content and you make a lot of money, well, then you'll use the money in constructive ways. And when you have a lot of money and you're discontent, you will use the money to spread discontent. That was my take home for 9/11. I didn't used to talk about this kind of stuff, but 9/11, I realized we were doing a whitewater rafting trip. So I kind of got distance from it. We saw it on the news in the morning, and then we were out on the river for the rest of the day. And so I got some distance from it. The take home for me was discontent people will always spread discontent. And if those people who know what contentment is, and I claim to be one of those people, if we don't do more to spread contentment than they do to spread discontent, guess where we're headed? And you see it happening. So, so after 9/11, because I had this experience when I was 27, I never talked to anybody about that experience for 31 years. Because it was my experience that answered my question. There was nothing in that experience that said, go and tell everybody. And it wasn't until 9/11 I said, you know what? We need to put focus and emphasis on what it means to be a human being in touch with the beauty of their own existence. Because if 8 billion people felt peaceful and loved and inspired, we could all sit down and help each other live better, instead of like stealing from each other and beating each other up and killing each other and dropping bombs on each other and all that other crazy stuff that we do. It all comes out of discontent. Our rulers are discontent. Our and the people they rule are discontent, right? And out of discontent comes damage. Yeah. And that's why, I mean, that's why, at 83 now, I'm really clear about it.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Right. And so in terms of like, what is my big project? 8 billion people find out how to get into their own self-knowledge practice. And out of that comes a change in the world as a natural expression.
Udo, this has been a phenomenal conversation, and
you haven't said much.
we will definitely have you back on the show. There's a couple of people I'd like to introduce you to. I'll talk to you about it offline.
Okay.
And where do you want us to send people? Is there a website, a book?
I have a new book out. It's called Your Body Needs an Oil Change.
Okay.
And it's it's not just about oils. It's also a little bit about human nature. And I'm working on human nature and health, like I said. I have a website, udoerasmus.com. I think if you look for the book, I think you get to read a couple of chapters for free. I have a YouTube channel, Udo Erasmus. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not hard to find. If you write my name in Udo, U-D-O, that's a strange enough name that if you put that in, I show up on the first page of Google.
Yeah.
Talk about search engine optimization.
Searchability.
Yeah, my parents did that. I had a problem with my name when I was a kid because I wanted to fit in, right? Like as a teenager. But now it turns out really well. There's a few other Udos around, but not very many.
No.
So I'm on the first page, and Fats That Heal, Fats That Kill. If you look that up, it's easy to find.
Yeah.
And so Udo Erasmus, if you spell my name right, you find all kinds of places. I've been doing this for 45 years.
Yeah.
So
Udo,
yeah.
We end each episode by asking you, our guest expert, for your top 3 expert action steps in bullet point form. So what say you? These are your best pieces of life.
I'm not into advice. Bullets. Can we call them stars?
Sure.
I'm just having fun. Okay, I would say, if I look at I would say the first thing is heartache. Everybody knows heartache. It's triggered by all kinds of things. Somebody dumps you get heartache. Your grandmother who you were close to dies, you get heartache. Your dog runs away, you get heartache. Somebody promises something and you don't deliver, you get disappointed, which is heartache. And you feel it in your chest. It's uneasy, painful, uncomfortable feeling, right? Mm-hmm. So that's triggered by lots of things in the world. But the trigger is not the cause. The cause for heartache is that when you were in your mother's womb, there was no place to go and nothing to do, and everything was taken care of, and it was pretty safe. So your focus, where was your focus? Your focus was inside, in its source, in the space you occupies, in the space your body occupies. And you were in the most boring possible situation imaginable, but you weren't bored. You were in bliss. You were just hanging out. Some people say that's what paradise was. And then you got booted out of paradise and you had to get to know the world. And so your focus went out through your senses into the world. And then you got lost in the world and you got disconnected from yourself. And that's where heartache began. So the cause of heartache is your disconnection from your inner true nature. So the first thing I would say, start with heartache. When you feel heartache, sit with it quietly, calmly, feel it, acknowledge it. You might have some tears. It's okay. Accept it, appreciate it, embrace it. Be grateful for the fact that heartache is calling you out of your head, into your body, into your inner space. And close, like less than a hair's breadth behind your heartache is your reconnection. Okay, that's the first. So you start with heartache. Nobody likes heartache. We try to distract ourselves, we ignore it or deny it or rationalize it away into some head trip, or we blame it on somebody. But actually, This is your disconnection from yourself. Natural, normal, necessary, but coming back, it's like heartache is like thirst. Thirst makes water relevant. Hunger makes food relevant. Tiredness makes sleep relevant. Heartache makes peace relevant. Heartache makes coming home relevant. So I would say with that, start with that. And especially if you're seekers, because seekers are driven by heartache. When you take it down to the biology of it,
right?
We're driven by the heartache. Huh?
What's number two?
So start with that. The second is find how you can step into your inner silence. And sometimes I just like to say, okay, close your eyes, see how still you can become. How deep can you go into that? How long can you stay there? How lightly, easily, quietly, gently can you breathe? And when you do that, what do you discover? So the second is the discovery of your own inner nature. And that the deeper you go in that comes to expression automatically. When you get connected, then literally your life changes. It's not about, oh my God, what can I do to get myself taken care of? It's like, no, I'm taken care of. How can I help? And so your life changes. It becomes a life of service, simply because you did the homework and realized that you're taken care of. So I would say stillness practice is number 2. And then the third that comes out of it pretty naturally is the inspired purpose, by looking around, looking at what are your talents, what are your experiences, what are your interests, and what are the situations you live in, and how can you have a positive effect on that situation. So that's 3, right?
Beautiful. Love them. Love them, love them, love them.
Yeah.
Udo Erasmus, man, it's been a blast having you on the show. Thanks for coming.
Well, thank you. And thank you for letting me rant.
Listener, to find out more about today's amazing guest, the one and only Udo Erasmus, go to the show notes at thethoughtleaderrevolution.com, pick up a copy of his new book, check out his website, and if you enjoyed this episode, share it with someone else who needs the message. Until next time, goodbye.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.